So let's move on to the next session of the event, and this is a panelist of 3 guests, and the title of the panel is Driving Business Value with AI. So I'm going to do a quick introduction of the panelists, and we're going to go straight into some of the talking panel question. So all the way to my right side is Christopher Yu, who's the Vice President and Cognitive Computing Architect at Fidelity Investment. He's a technologist with a business mindset who's focused on delivering value by building teams, executing strategy, and employing technology. He's excited by the process of finding unmet needs and creating solutions that can delight customers and business partners. Sitting in the middle is Jerry Gupta, Senior Vice President, PC and R&D at Swiss Re, one of the world's leading providers of reinsurance and insurance. He's an executive with experience leading data science and technology initiatives and managing both business data science and technical teams. And here to my right side is Sanjeev Fernando, who is the Senior Vice President in AI and Analytics Platform at Optum, where he leads the AI and Analytics Platform team for Optum Enterprise Analytics. He's responsible for developing platforms that support the design and development of leading-edge AI models and analytic tools for the enterprise. So yeah, welcome the panelists to the podium. So 2 key themes that I want to talk about, in the panel today is how can business drive real value from AI system, and then how can we ensure that AI system are meeting a need. So maybe we can start our session by for each of you to talk about what are the different AI initiatives at your respective organization, and what type of business impact you hope to achieve with this initiative. Maybe you can start with Chris.
Yeah, sure. Hi. So I work for Fidelity Investments. We, if you don't know, we do a lot of things in 401k and retail investment, etc. Right. Well, obviously, it's a fairly big size company, 60,000 people, and as you might imagine, people get a little upset if you lose their money, right? So that's not something we tend to do often or want to do. That's an outcome that is not desired, right? In our space, and the more obvious things that are there, like the unpredictability of the market, etc. There are some projects there, but just in a nutshell, just because I can't really say specifics, right? Is that we tend to try to push things toward things that don't have a clear outcome, mostly because, as luck would have it, and this is something that hopefully all organizations can kind of benefit from, all the work that people have done prior to AI, etc. A lot of it has been very good, right? Businesses in general, they've gotten to where they are because things have worked out, or a lot of things have worked out. Maybe not everything, but things have worked out, right? So I think part of the secret sauce there is trying to be focused on things that you couldn't do otherwise, or would take a lot longer otherwise, or take a lot more people otherwise, right? So examples abound on things that are not straightforward. There's not an A plus B equals C solution for things. For those sorts of things, it might be good to kind of focus on AI.
Sure. Jerry, do you want to take this?
Yeah, absolutely. So Swiss Re is probably one of the largest companies you've never heard of. It touches each one of you. We insure the insurers. So if you have auto insurance, home insurance, chances are your insurer has used us as a backstop for your insurance, right? So we are a reinsurer, we also asset manager, we also go direct. And just because we are exposed to, or we are carrying so much risk, we have a very wide sort of net that we cast in terms of what we look for. So we look at climate risk, we look at better underwriting models, so better assess any risk whatsoever, be it automotive, be it life, be it home, be it property. Climate is a big part of what we do, obviously. We are also looking at risks related to transition economy, so moving from carbon economy to renewable energy, so there's risk there. We look at earthquakes, we look at wildfires, we look at risks related to pandemics, risks related to your lifestyle resulting in poor health outcomes. So you name it, chances are we are doing something in it. Specifically, my role, I am the head of PNC R&D. So PNC is property and casualty. So I look at, from a data science perspective, we look at building cutting edge models to predict risk. So we work with our partners at MIT, Stanford, other universities. We also have other partners with whom we collaborate on, and we launch or we develop models that help us better assess risk. And then we just launched a service called Data Coach as a Service, just to basically level the playing field for insurance companies when it comes to having the adequate data science talent.
Thanks for sharing.
So Jerry said that he works for one of the largest companies you probably don't know. I might have him beat a little bit. Like Optum is a quite large company too. We're one half of United Health Group, which is United Health Group today is over almost $250 billion. $100 billion of that is Optum. You're probably, hopefully, more familiar with our sister company, United Healthcare, which is the largest private healthcare insurer in the U.S. Optum's a multifaceted healthcare services company. We serve almost everyone in the U.S. healthcare system: patients, providers, governments, employers, life sciences companies. A couple quick notes on why, how far and wide our reach is. We employ more primary care physicians in the U.S. than anyone today. We have one of the largest pharmacy benefit businesses in the country today. And so, as I said, you may not be aware of it, but you may be interacting with our services and our employees or our customers every day in delivering your healthcare needs. When we think about AI, because we have so many diverse businesses, especially in Optum, we do have sort of a high-level framework, mental model that we think about things. Obviously, the business value is incredibly important. The access to data to train against. We think about the quality of the annotation and labels to train against, because oftentimes our models, as I'm sure with other regulated industries, need to have a fairly high bar in certain performance metrics like precision and recall. Sometimes when we use labels in transactional systems where there's a diversity of decision making, different iterative reliability, we almost hit like a ceiling in model performance. And then we obviously, as I think all of us consider, what are the regulatory regimes that we need to support, and how does that constrain our use of artificial intelligence?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for providing those introductory notes on prospective AI initiatives at your organization. And you can see, there's a wide-ranging industry that we talk about here, from financial services to insurance, and then healthcare, and to your point about all of these being regulated industry. I think there's definitely certain barriers of adopting cutting-edge technologies like machine learning AI into this industry, right? So maybe the next question we can talk about is how to work with the business partner to bring AI into your organization. So all of you are technologists, I assume, and it's important to have this sort of manage stakeholder, right? To work with them, collaborate with them, and sell them on the value of AI. So maybe you can actually talk about how in your organization you collaborate with the relevant stakeholders to ensure that AI is well adopted, especially within the regulated industry. Maybe you can start with you.
Oh yeah, sure, I can start. So this is a big topic for us, right? My particular group actually is something that myself as well as my direct manager kind of started six and a half years ago. And it was kind of a hope and a dream at that time, right? There was it was the kind of thing where I don't know who coined this term, but there's striking when the iron's hot, and then there's striking until the iron is hot, right? This is more of the second one, right? So we were keenly aware of maybe what some of the technology can do, but adapting that to an organization that picks it up, that's the huge challenge, right? Because the proverbial 17-year-old in their basement, maybe they can create a model, maybe, right? Like if they're given enough access to learning, they could pop something out. Now, does that model that they create in their basement, can that immediately go to production? Probably not, right? And for that matter, would you trust whatever that model is to not be biased to and to handle someone's money, right? Or anything to do with someone's portfolio? The answer is probably also no, right? So with this like kind of I guess defensiveness or conservativeness, if you want to call it that, we don't want to lose the customer trust just because you want to try some fancy new thing, right? So the business owners, for example, are keenly aware of this. They are looking after their side of the business. They want to get the best outcomes for whatever their customers are, right? And for our company, we're quite broad in the offerings, so there's a lot of pockets of business around, right? So the way that we work with them as technologists is really to ensure that that their goals are the things that we are representing, and we can show them how we can help to achieve them using the technology. So it's about fitting these things to the technology, putting it into their terms, and giving them like some incremental value along the lines of with their timelines, right? Because if you can say, hey, in 2 years I'll change your world, but in 6 months I can't give you anything, then it's hard for them to kind of say, hey, yeah, let's go do it, right? But if you can say, I know your goal in 2 years is this, and in the next whatever the time frame is, month, 2 months, and so on, here's a step I can help you take, and then here's the next step, and here's how we can figure out that we're going to continually learn. They're much more willing to kind of support you on your journey, right? So that's kind of been our journey over the last few years.
Yeah, I see. Just so like framing the technology in terms of business terminology, and then adopt an incremental success approach, like one by one instead of a zero.
Yeah, you have to become their best friend,
Yeah.
and the person who actually is there to kind of give them the candy they need to get to the next step. If you can't be that person, then it's hard to keep going.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Jared, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so we know 85% of data science projects fail, and about 16% of those projects fail even after the model is built and it's successful, right? So 16% of successful models don't get deployed. So I actually wear two hats. So I'm a practicing data scientist. I work in a large corporation, but I'm also an academic. I teach data science at MIT and I teach data science at London Business School. So have a little bit broader perspective than just my organization. And so we know what the failure modes are. We know what the three main failure modes are: lack of talent, lack of ROI, and then obviously the last one we just talked about, lack of infrastructure understanding, right? So lack of talent, we can park that aside, which is 36% of the failure rate. 33% of the failure rate is because of lack of ROI. And so I have developed a framework, I call it the pause framework. What we do is we look every time, so I'm assuming most of you work in an environment where data science is a shared services model, maybe a little bit of a hub and spoke, but you don't have distributed teams. So I focus really hard on pause framework, which basically stands for pain point, actors, workflow, and basically simplicity. So I will not embark on any project unless the pain point is clear, it is narrow, and it is routine. So three attributes of the pain point: obvious, narrow, routine. Can't be too broad. Actors, unless all the stakeholders are identified, be it the ones who are working on it, be it the ones who are going to be impacted by it. Could be users, could be customers, could be anyone. Workflow. If the end-to-end workflow is not identified, which is which systems will absorb it, where will we get data, which systems will surface it, and which systems will be impacted, how it will work. don't start. Because if you don't have the end-to-end solution in mind on day one, it gets difficult. That's the 16% of the failure rate. And it has to be simple, right? And then, there's the other framework called the VICE framework: vision, incentives, capabilities, resources. Unless those are lined up, don't even start on it, right? So again, there's a whole science to it. I can spend a whole day. I actually teach a masterclass on this, which is a 4-hour masterclass. But that's sort of the high-level framework. And I will tell you, empirically speaking, we talked about 85% failure rate over the last 3 years. And again, this is an anomaly. It will change. I will have failures, but we've had 100% success rate over the last 3 years. Admittedly, that will change. We will have failures, but we know based on the trends, the failure rate is lower once you follow the right frameworks. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing kind of the context and where you come from with that academic background as well. That's these two frameworks, right? Pulse and VICE. What to say? Just out of curiosity, like, would you get inspired by any other framework, and how did you conceptualize, these methodology?
Yeah, I think it was trial and error. It also research. On an average, we talk to 100 executives on a regular basis who are on various stages of their AI journey, data science journey, and you get a list of pain points. The failure modes is based on research we did at London Business School. Professor Michael Davies, he did that research. He also teaches at MIT as well. And so we know what the failure modes are. So once you know what the needs are, once you know what the failure modes are, once you know what the capability gaps are, it becomes sort of a little bit easier to develop the right frameworks to match that, right? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of it is experiential. Lot of it is based on reconfiguring some of the existing frameworks. So a lot of you know about CRISP DM framework. So we have our own version of CRISP DM framework as well. We call it the Data Model Decisions Value Framework, developed by Professor Bertsimas at MIT. So again, we use different frameworks, and again, I don't want to take too much time. Happy to chat with you guys after this panel, or you can reach out to me.
Yeah, I think Chris is something interesting too. Like in the same way, we got started in machine learning like almost 6 years ago, 2016 maybe. And maybe it was in the teenager base, but we had single contributors building models, and we validated that use case and had some immediate, but not super substantial wins. If I think about our journey from there to now, obviously the business case is incredibly important, but now we're trying to ask ourselves, how do we scale and sort of rinse and repeat more broadly across the enterprise? And that's where I think, at least for our industry and our company, we need better control might be the wrong word, but visibility, control, and trust through this, what are becoming basic steps of this, like starting with data, establishing features, algorithmic selection, validation, validation and evaluation on multiple dimensions, not just performance or fairness. And so now we're trying to figure out, how do we snap everyone to that, but have degrees of freedom to run out and use the latest AutoML if it's appropriate, or use the latest annotation capabilities, or use the latest mechanism to deploy, you think about things like Ray and stuff like that. And I think that's the challenge now, is I think when I think about business user adoption, it's they want all those things. They want that control because it gives them certainty and gives them maybe, we think about what keeps CEOs up at night is reputation risk. If I introduce something that fails terribly, I think one of the other speakers talked about bombing a hospital. That's horribly terrible. That's what I think are missing now in AI right now. We have all these great tools, but we don't have that sort of control plane to give people certainty, because then you can start scaling things.
Yeah, really like that point. I think this machining is probabilistic in nature. So it's definitely, that's an element of how do you cope with uncertainty, and I think having these frameworks and, to your point, control plane to be able to deal with that uncertainty will increase sort of the confidence interval in general, right? For consumers and adopters of machine learning. Back to one of the earlier point that Chris talked about, you talk about sort of incremental wins, right? Like not just a black and white approach, but also you need like a spectrum of specific milestone when you work in business to talk about bringing AI from the lab into production. And I think in software in general, we have this concept of minimum viable product, or MVP, right? You want to build something simple and test it to the market. And I think we can probably achieve the same thing in the AI context. So maybe the question is like, how can we build the right size AI MVP? What does it look like in your respective organization?
Yeah, so I think that's a very prescient question, right? Because if you have a oversized MVP, you can look like you're failing, even though you might be learning. If it's too small, it might look like it's not valuable at all, right? So to get the right size MVP, I think it really gets down to and one of the I think this might be a cousin of the framework that you're talking about, but there's a term that I've started to call things that it's like shiny object syndrome, which is it's just like a maybe partially, sometimes irrational exuberance to the new thing, right? Now, a lot of these technologies, a lot of these ways of doing things, there actually is real promise, right? And there can be some things that you achieve eventually, right? But will you achieve it on your first step? Don't know, right? Maybe not, probably not, right? Can you achieve it on your first step? Maybe, right? But I think the trick to kind of keep going and providing the incremental value is being able to tell the difference between what's just shiny object. You wanna put the newest framework into your solution. Why? Because you heard about it and this article was really exciting. That's not really a great reason, right? That might be a good reason to start the conversation, but as a technical partner or even as another business partner, you kind of have to realize that like what are you trying to achieve with the tool? The tool is just the tool, right? If the tool does what you need it to do, then go ahead and try, and then but define some incremental value that will enable you to kind of choose your next step. Don't expect it to just change the world overnight. Hey, I released my MVP, I'm done, right? No, not like that, right? You have to be able to say, I know this won't achieve my overall goal, but this is what will give me my next bit of learning. And then I can go from there. If that MVP that I do does X, I know what to do next. If it does Y, I know what to do next. If it does Z, well, I guess we'll have to talk about it, right? But you'll have to prepare the business partners for that kind of discussion. The fact that they won't necessarily like and maybe it all goes to like those expectations go to like the OKPIs and the KPIs themselves, because you have to say, here's what I think we can achieve with the KPI. Here's what we'll learn, and this is your overall goal. Here are possible paths to get there, and you basically have to build out enough of that kind of roadmap so that they can continue to say, okay, all right, I see we're on step 2. Are we going to step 3 soon? Are we skipping step 3? Why are we skipping step 3? Right? Empower them to feel like they're part of the process, so that they understand how they're getting to their goal. Because if you don't get that, then they're not so willing to just pony up purse strings for things that don't seem like they're providing value. So I think it all gets down to working with the business and seeing what they think would be a valuable step, rather than just what you think, right? So to marry those two things together really provides you with an MVP.
Right. Yeah. Having that roadmap clear, align with the business and collaborate with them to design that blueprint. I think is very actionable advice.
The shiny object thing is a challenge, I think, with AI ML too. Like, and my new boss and a number of colleagues come from like places like Amazon and Google now. The folks at Amazon have taught me like they're not big believers in MVPs, because that leads to lots of little shiny objects that don't actually impact the business. They try to think of things as minimally remarkable products, which is just a change in terms. But what does that really mean is that they want to work backwards from that customer, solve that problem, and put it right in the hands of the customer right away. But to do that, you have to be able to scale it a little bit more. And then when we transpose that mental model to healthcare, we also solve another big problem, which is like it's never been appropriate or ever easy to do MVPs in a healthcare setting, right? It's your patients' lives, people at risk. You can try to find some small segments, maybe in a call center routing or something like that, to try to help people be more efficient. But we don't have these like sort of ability to just test on our customers. And I'm sure that's the case for many companies in more regulated industries. And so thinking of things as being scaled and ready to go to be robust for those customer scenarios is something that I think gets us past that sort of shiny object level.
Sure, yeah. Thanks for sharing the context. You want to add anything?
Yeah, as an ex-Amazonian, I concur, right? The minimum likable product is a really good definition that Amazon has. But in the insurance industry, unfortunately, the big tech frameworks don't work. Like Sanjay pointed out, we are a highly regulated industry. The cost of failure is really high. Again, explainability requirements are really high as well. So, it really boils down to, basically understanding what your constraints are. What's your institution like? What are your infrastructural constraints? What are regulatory constraints? What are data constraints and all of those things? But in addition to what Chris and Sanjay just said, I think, when you do MLP-based or incremental projects, it really boils down to what is your acceptability criteria, right? That's number one. Is it 75% AUC? Is it 80? Is it 85%? And every time they'll say, oh, we want to get 80, 90%. The question you ask is, okay, where are you right now? And they're like, oh, it's judgment-based, right? So if it's judgment-based, even if you're 65 AUC, you're good. The second thing is a lot of data scientists get boggled down with AUC, where they should really be, especially in life sciences and life and health, it's really not about accuracy. It's really about precision and recall, right? In most cases, it is maximizing precision or recall or minimizing false positive or false negatives. Accuracy is probably third or fourth metric they should be looking at, but they end up focusing on that. Then they go to a business stakeholder. Business stakeholder is like, no. I'm more worried about false negatives. I don't want to send a patient home who has stage 3 cancer, as opposed to anything else. So I think those are some of the mechanics that you have to be aware of.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Both the sort of having an acceptable minimum acceptable threshold for the performance, as well as choosing the right metrics to evaluate, right? Not just about accuracy, but also about more specific precision and recall for specific segment of the users. And you actually mentioned a little bit about kind of like some of the challenges related to infrastructure and data, right? And given the fact that all the three industries here are regulated, I would assume it might be somewhat of a challenge to even get access to the data, right? With data privacy, data security, data governance, all this terminology somewhat ambiguous and unclear, and I think it's also sort of very particular into each industry. Mm-hmm. So maybe the next question related to that is like how does your AI team execute data access and sort of data management strategy to ensure that your technology and your workflow meet all these requirements related to privacy and security, all that nature. Yeah.
So we have a very robust data governance mechanism. It's called DGF. I forget what the full form is. So data is centrally collected, stored, and you have to go through hoops to get it. So people like me who love to access data and do models, we don't like it, but we know that it's there for a reason. So you have to specify purpose. You have to specify how long you're going to need it. You're going to specify, and then the data is categorized in terms of what's the permissible purpose and all of those things. But we are almost running out of time. So one short thing, in terms of the models we build, I invariably, and I don't do modeling hands-on modeling, I've probably stopped doing it the last couple of years. I just do it for fun now. But every time at work when we start a modeling exercise, always start with some regression technique. I don't automatically go to XGBoost or neural network or OCT or any of those things. In our industry, most of the time you can't even use XGBoost for most of those things. You have to use things like decision tree, CART, even random forest is too opaque, right? So always start with the simplest possible model, have an acceptability threshold already established, and if your basic simplest model is achieving that, don't overcomplicate it. So
Yeah, I think for us, like in healthcare, as Jerry noted, and the regression point is incredibly important, but like we've lived with a very important and something we very much embrace, data privacy regime defined in the U.S., commonly referred to as HIPAA, for better part of like maybe 20 years now. So data, we've always been stewards of the data that we receive to help support individuals, whether they be members of an insurance plan or patients at a hospital or at a provider setting. So that's sort of like in our DNA. As we think about expanding into machine learning and more probabilistic methods or even advanced analytic methods, we start from there. And the trace forward, trace back lineage of the data, like the data is always like the 80% of our problems. Not problems, but like our work to get that right, to get a solution out there. And I'll just make anecdotally, like I'm sure we all get hit by vendors. They all have very cool workspaces and they all have this big upload button. And I'm like, that's not us. Like we're not uploading any of our data that way.
Yeah.
We start with the data and build forward because that's what we have to do, and we embrace that fully.
Actually.
Yeah, and I would say very similar to Sanjay. And like we have to be very careful about the personal identifying information. I mean, not quite HIPAA, but like similar, very similar.
GDPR,
Yeah. So we have to be very careful about just making sure that like any data that anyone has access to, you can't tell whose it is. You can't tell any personal information, nothing like that, right? So, and able to bridge the gap that Jay was kind of poking at of people who want to play with the data, we just have to make sure that it's mastered. We have to make sure that all that stuff is proper. It never exists in the bad state. And then our challenge as tech folks is to see how can we mobilize the folks that would do good things with the data, that have access to enough of the data that would actually help them do their job, right? The good news about our space is that for the models that we're running, you shouldn't need piecemeal information like what street they live on. There's no, that doesn't really matter, right? There's certain aspects that you may need, but a large majority of those things can just be purely redacted, ignored, and we do our best to kind of make sure those are out of the mix. And then we kind of get like that and more by things like bias, because the whole bias thing is something that's come up as of late, as in you might not be pulling in something specifically like gender, but there may be things related to, highly correlated with gender that might be in your model. And can you do something to get rid of that too, right? So yeah, it's definitely something we have to deal with intimately all the time, but it's something that is serviceable, something that you can do something about.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So choosing simple models, handling, complying with HIPAA, PII, and then come up with methods to remove all these potential biases, proxy level metrics, right? I think those are really good, kind of good points to sort of close up our panelists. We have like about 2 minutes left, so if any of you have any question for the panelists, feel free to ask them. Yeah.
Thank you all for the session talk. One thing I've been wondering is, in regulated industries, how do you navigate the landscape of augmenting your customers' data with third-party sources while preserving their privacy, while eliminating bias, knowing that there is a ton of value in getting SDOH data, census data, et cetera, augmented to get a better picture of their holistic self?
So it depends on what level of granularity you want to get into, right? So if you are in a regulated industry like we are, and I think to some extent you are as well, Chris, we are limited a lot. And so We are not limited just by the regulators, we're also limited by clients. So if Optum is a client and we get their data, they tell us how we can use that data, and they tell us, they may not even give us names. So if it's an aggregate level, then there are ways to augment, zip code level data, all of those things. But at a PII level, we don't really augment. It becomes super difficult, super risky. When it comes to data, we are under the GDPR regime, we are under the CCPA regime. So we are super conservative.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. I think the one aspect that we are constantly trying to get better at is in evaluating model fairness and equity. What are the right resources? What are the sources of truth that help us evaluate those dimensions of the model? Right now, it's been a very much case-by-case basis because of the myriad of important controls we have around the data, both from a business use perspective and a privacy perspective. But I think there's more work to be done there, so we can more seamlessly make sure that even at the earliest stages of the models, we're constantly evaluating output, class distributions, things like that, to make it a more ingrained part of our model building.
Yeah, and I'll just plus one on those as well. And and for us, it's less about just go use the data, to the point you can't really do that, right? Everything has to be very clear in the open, and if anything is used, you need to tell them about it, right? So the big thing is just to and I'm not sure if it's the same thing with you guys, but legal risk compliance, they know their space, but that space could be the space of 20 years ago, right? So it's a battle to really have those conversations with them to make sure that they shouldn't just rest on their laurels. They need to be okay, but look at what's possible today, and let's work with them to kind of figure out what's possible, what's not possible within the regulation. You can't skip over that part. Yeah.
Absolutely. So unfortunately, we ran out of time, but I guess you guys are going to be available afterwards for people having a question, right? So yeah, I think we cover a lot in the panel today, ranging from everything from collaborating with business partners to sunny object syndrome to building AI MVPs to some specific challenges working with data. And I think that the unique angle coming from all this regulated industry really illuminate your perspective on this topic. So I'm sure there are a lot of questions from the audience that they can ask afterwards. So Johnny, thanks the panelists for a great fireside chat. Yeah.
Thank you.